In a world where darkness is almost the only space where humans can exist, Lyra, a blind woman by birth, had to find a way to overcome her deficiency with a level of creativity that few could imagine. She couldn't see the light, but she was the first to create a technology called light memory sensory, a device simulating the sun, not through sight but through emotions and memories. Lyra could feel the light without seeing it, but in contrast, the world around her judged her as abnormal, outdated, and sometimes, no one wanted her to exist in the civilized world they had built. Kael, an independent pilot who had gone through countless battles and sorrow, came to Andorra only to repair a malfunctioning system. But when he met Lyra, a strange feeling overwhelmed him. This girl couldn't see the light with her eyes, but she could feel it more clearly than anyone Kael had ever met. The sensation of light wasn't just a metaphor, it was life, the values Kael had long forgotten. And in their chance meetings, Kael's heart, which had become numb, was awakened by the warmth Lyra brought. Their relationship began gently, not hurriedly, without drama, but with a subtle connection that only those who had gone through deep sorrow could understand. They spoke not only with words but with silence, feeling, and listening. But like all stories, peace never lasts forever. On the Solara 4 space station, a place that had never welcomed natural sunlight because it orbited a dead planet, there was a secluded research area for those genetically modified to adapt to the dark. Here, Lyra lived alone, in a room filled with sound, temperature, and artificial memories of light that she had never seen. Lyra was born into a world that didn't need eyes because light was considered a luxury. A defect in her genetic modification left her eyes incapable of receiving images. But Lyra didn't give up. She spent her youth building a special system, light memory sensory, a technology that connected the brain with a simulation of light through sensation. In this system, each beam of light wasn't seen by the eyes, but felt by the heart. One day, the station's central system malfunctioned. Kael Ravan, a former soldier turned technician, was called to fix the electrical system. He had fought on the Murox planet, and in his heart, there were wounds that no light could heal. He didn't expect much, until he heard Lyra's voice through the system. Have you ever thought that light can touch you, even if you can't see it? Kael paused. There was something in her voice, not weak, but simple, understanding, and strangely intriguing. He didn't reply, but the next day, he came back, pretending to check the signal. Lyra didn't ask much. She continued to tell him about the light she had never seen, the sunset she could only sense through thermal data, the sunrise she reconstructed using acoustic vibrations. For the first time in many years, Kael listened quietly, not analyzing or fixing anything, but simply listening. Day by day, their nameless meetings became a routine. She silently made tea. He adjusted the malfunctioning sensors without being asked. Then, one night, when the station's electricity flickered, Lyra asked softly, "Have you ever touched the light?" Kael let out a dry laugh. "I've been burned by it." Lyra went silent. But she didn't ask more. Kael stood up, ready to leave as always. But for some reason, he stopped. 1 second, then 2, then he turned back and stepped closer. The girl who couldn't see, but could sense the movement of air, felt her heart slow down. Kael's finger gently touched Lyra's cheek. She didn't pull away. The touch of real human skin, not through biological devices, not through cold signals, was something Lyra had never been allowed to experience. But this time, she wasn't afraid. That feeling wasn't light, but it was the closest thing to it. The light she had created finally touched the heart of another person. The atmosphere in the memory room always carried a special breath. Lyra knew it wasn't real light, not the real sun. But when Kael entered, she didn't need to see, she could feel it through the space. The light in the room began to function again after the data malfunction, its gentle yellow rays like honey, warm and captivating. It was the first time she felt that she was not alone in her own darkness. Kael stood in the middle of the room, his face gently etched with unsaid pain. He looked out the window, through the frosted glass, where the black sky of Solar 4 seemed to hold its suffocating silence. There was no trace of natural light except for what Lyra created, but on this night, the simulated rays seemed to spark a fire within him, a fire he thought had died long ago. Lyra stood silently, feeling each warm gust of wind wrap around her body. Kael's voice echoed, deep, like a confession never spoken before. My sister, she died in an attack on the base I served at. They called me loyal, but I was loyal to a mistake. The price I paid was this scar. Lyra slowly walked toward him, her fingers beginning to search the space, reaching for his back. Though she couldn't see, she could still feel the pain of that scar, the pain not just of a physical wound, but of a wound in his soul. Her fingers gently traced over the marked back. With each touch, Lyra silently whispered forgiveness, not to him, but to herself when she decided not to live in painful memories anymore but to live for this moment. The moment when she was close to another human, not through devices or simulated sensations. The moment when she could see him, not with her eyes, but with her heart. Kael turned back, his eyes staring into the empty space before him. He didn't say anything, but that look, a lost and broken gaze, said it all. He had grown weary of the dead and the unforgivable reasons behind them. Lyra wouldn't let him leave again. In the stillness of that space, there were no words, just a pause. The pause of two people who had lived too long in their wounds, and now, they just wanted to find life again in the warmth of genuine affection. Kael reached out, silently. He gently touched Lyra's face. The warmth of his hand, though rough, felt like the gentlest touch she had ever experienced. Under the soft light, Lyra's heart began to beat faster, not from fear or overwhelming emotions, but because she knew that, finally, she had found someone who didn't see her with eyes, but felt her with his heart. Kael leaned down, gently pressing his lips against hers. The kiss wasn't hurried, it wasn't filled with tears, it was just tenderness and connection, a connection they had never had in their lives. Lyra softly closed her eyes, unable to see, but feeling everything. That kiss was a rebirth for both of them, for Lyra, who had never known what natural light was, and for Kael, who had lived too long in the darkness of the past. But in this moment, they were truly two people, no longer ghosts lingering in their own worlds. After the kiss, they sat back, not saying a word. But this silence, full of unspoken stories, was the language they needed. The silence had immense power, enough to connect them in the deepest way, without any devices or simulated light. This was the beginning of a story, A story not written with words but built with the hearts of two people who had gone through too many breaks, yet had finally found peace in a soft kiss under the simulated sun. Although the feelings between Kael and Lyra had begun to blossom, not everything was calm in their world. Kael couldn't forget the times he passed through the devastated zones of past operations, where innocent people were exploited, their memories stolen and turned into weapons. The memories of love, joy, and fear of humans were seized, taken, and used for inhumane purposes. The underground organization Kael discovered was becoming an increasingly larger threat. They were scheming to manipulate memories to program war robots, emotionless, soulless warriors. What they did was scour human memories, steal emotions, and turn them into a cold source of energy. And Lyra, with her ability to preserve the rare and precious light data in her brain, was their next target. Kael felt like a storm was about to strike. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't stand to watch Lyra, the one he had come to care for, be put in harm's way. He knew that if he didn't act now, she would become a tool in the hands of those without a shred of humanity. One night, while Lyra was sitting quietly by the light simulation machine, Kael approached her, his eyes burning with an inner fire. He lowered his voice, trying to stay calm. "Lyra, I just discovered an underground organization hunting for the memories of people like you. They want to extract the data in your brain and turn it into a weapon of war. They won't let you go. I need to get you out of here, right now." Lyra didn't look at him, but she could feel the worry in Kael's voice. However, she calmly turned her gaze back to the soft yellow lights filling the space. "I can't leave," Lyra replied, her voice steady but firm. "The memories inside me aren't just mine. They are the only hope for millions who have forgotten the warmth of the light. If I leave, who will bring hope to them?" Kael fell silent, looking into her eyes. He knew she was right. The data Lyra stored inside her wasn't something that could easily be replaced. But he couldn't let her face the people hunting her alone. He had to protect her, not just because of the feelings he had for her, but because of the greater ideal she carried within her. "Lyra," Kael said, his voice filled with resolve. "If you won't leave, I'll take you with me, by any means. Even if I have to fight, even if I have to face the whole world, I won't let you bear this alone." Lyra turned back to look at Kael. In the soft light of the simulation, she could feel the intensity in his eyes. She wasn't weak, but in this moment, her heart softened. She knew Kael was fighting not just for her but for an entire generation of people who had lost their memories and hope. "I'll go with you," Lyra said, her voice now softer, as though she had made her final decision. "But not because I'm afraid. I'm going with you because I believe in change. I believe we can bring light not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us." Kael took her hand, a strange warmth rising in his chest. He looked at her, and in that moment, he understood that no matter how many dangers they had to face, he and Lyra would always stand by each other. Just as they were about to leave the room, a faint sound echoed from afar, a mechanical noise, cold and relentless. A shadowy figure appeared from the distance. Lyra's security system had detected the breach. "They've arrived," Kael whispered. He pulled Lyra towards him, keeping her hand tight, not letting her see what was coming. They rushed out of the room, but Kael knew that, no matter how quickly they moved, this time, escaping would not be easy. Under the dim light of Andorra, where Lyra and Kael had never known true peace, a new race began, one not just to protect memories, but to protect the only light left in this world. And as they ran, they understood that some sacrifices were inevitable. The final night before the evacuation began, Kael and Lyra stood together on the peak of the old energy tower, a long-abandoned site where all the equipment had stopped working years ago. This tower was one of the rare places in the city that still held the primal emotional frequency, a range that had not been erased by technology or any controlling interventions. There were no physical forms, no light simulations, no sensory modifications. Only silence, filled with raw emotions, undefined and unanalyzed. Lyra stood next to Kael, her hands trembling lightly, sensing his breath closer than ever. She didn't need to see to know he was near, she only needed that feeling, the presence of someone who had stood by her through the hardest of days. The faint light from the night, a little emitted from the far-off sky, only added to the mystery of this place. The space enveloped them in silence, as if even the universe was holding its breath. They both stood still, feeling each other's breath, feeling the warmth on their skin. Lyra didn't need light to see him. That sensation was all she needed. His skin touching hers, gently, truly, without any devices or sensors to replace this real contact. Kael turned towards Lyra, his eyes gently gazing at her, eyes full of deep understanding, as if he knew what she was going through, the pains and worries she had never spoken of. In the darkness, the silence between them was no longer a distance, but a connection stronger than ever before. "I can't believe I found someone like you," Kael whispered, his voice warm, shimmering like a confession full of emotion. Lyra smiled softly, a gentle smile filled with peace she had never had before. "I always believed that light was something out of reach. But now, I can feel it through you." Kael lightly touched her face, feeling the coolness of her skin under his fingertips. He wasn't in a hurry, just letting each moment pass by, like a soothing feeling they both were sharing. This wasn't a rush, not the fiery passion of temporary desires. This was healing, the closeness of two people who had gone through much pain, now finding each other in a chaotic world. When Lyra gently lifted her gaze, their eyes met without words. In that moment, everything around them seemed to vanish. It was just the two of them, in the warm and quiet space of the tower peak. Kael couldn't take his eyes off her. He could feel the resilience in her, the determination of someone who had gone through many losses but still yearned to be loved. Her gaze, facing him, was both fragile and strong. He wanted to protect her, not just because of the feelings he had for her, but because he understood that she was the only one he had found in this life, the one he could share everything with. Kael gently lifted her, placing her in his arms. There was no urgency, no rush. They embraced in the stillness of the night, as their emotions began to merge into one, from sympathy, to healing, to the perfect connection of body and soul. "Can I keep you forever?" Kael whispered, his lips near her ear. Lyra didn't answer immediately, just felt his warm breath, the safety he brought. She smiled, not speaking, just letting the moment stretch on forever, as if they both had found peace in the fragments of their lives. It was that night, under the simulated light, that Lyra and Kael found something invisible yet so real, the healing from love and a connection without words. Their love was not something that could easily be measured by ordinary senses. It was a light so deep that it could melt away the darkness. With trust and newfound hope, they knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but at least, they had each other. And that was enough. As the footsteps echoed down the dark corridor of the old laboratory area, Kael knew that time had run out. They had been discovered, and now they were about to face the memory hunters. Those who would stop at nothing to achieve their goal, to harvest valuable emotional memories and use them to program war robots. Lyra was their next target. Lyra, the one Kael had been protecting all this time, now stood facing the greatest danger she had ever encountered. The simulated light in the room, which had once been a tool for peace and comfort, had now become a weapon. An instrument of betrayal and crime. "Run!" Kael shouted, but Lyra did not move. She stood still, her eyes filled with determination. Kael turned, his face covered in wounds, his body aching in pain. But he could not allow her to fall into their hands. He fought with all his strength, punches and gunfire cutting through the air. But it seemed to be useless. The memory hunters were too powerful, too ruthless. They didn't just want her. They wanted to take everything she had ever known. As Kael struggled to rise, his arm trembling with exhaustion, Lyra, in a moment of sacrifice and deep love, realized that their lives, their connection, were reaching their breaking point. "No, don't! Lyra!" Kael screamed. But she already knew what she had to do. Lyra, unable to see but feeling every breath he took, slowly closed her eyes. She activated the light data technology she had developed, but not just to create simple simulations for herself. She was now making a decision she had never wanted to make, sacrificing her memories to save Kael, to save those around her. The sensation of light flooded her body, and she felt as though she could reach everyone. She could connect with all. It was magical, as if she were no longer bound by her own physical limitations. Each memory, each emotion she held, was transmitted into the shared neural network. A brilliant wave of light made the entire city shine for the first time in hundreds of years. But that light did more than just illuminate the dark clouds of space. It also caused Kael's memories to become fragments. His recollections were wiped from Lyra's mind. When Kael opened his eyes and tried to call her name, he realized that she no longer looked at him the way she had before. A sense of emptiness, confusion, and pain enveloped him. He realized that his memories had been erased from Lyra's mind. She no longer remembered him. She no longer remembered the moments they had shared together. Kael. I. Lyra looked at him, her eyes empty, yet still holding softness, still containing care. Kael wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He could only stand there, sinking to the ground. His heart ached as he realized that everything he once had with her was now gone. Lyra stood still. Only the light within her remained, the light that had taken all the memories of Kael, of everything they had shared. And in that moment, she only knew that she could no longer remember. But she could still feel the love, the intense affection in the air, as if Kael was still there beside her. Lyra's sacrifice changed everything. Kael had not only lost her, but he had also lost everything he thought he could build. But in the pain, in the loss, a small spark of hope flickered. Lyra had given him a new chance. Though she no longer remembered him, the feelings she had for him still lingered in the space around them. In the memories she had transmitted into the shared neural network, Kael could still feel her somewhere, in some other space. And though Lyra had lost her memories of him, Kael was determined not to give up. He would find her again. He would help her restore her memories. And he would give her a future free from the constraints of the past. Even if he lost everything, Kael knew that as long as love and hope existed, one day, they would find each other again. Kael could not accept that Lyra had forgotten everything. He had lost so much in his life, but this time, he couldn't let her slip away without remembering the moments they had shared. She had given him everything, and even if she couldn't recall it, he would find a way to rewrite their story from the beginning. However, deep in his heart, Kael realized that love is not something that can be kept by strength or war. It is sacrifice. And in her final moment, Lyra had shown him that, even if memories are erased and they must start over, love will still be the light in the darkness. Lyra may not remember Kael, but the love she had for him still lived in the space around them, in the memories she had created. The light she transmitted was not just a technology, it was her feelings, an energy that would never run dry. And when Kael decided to start over, he knew that, despite all the losses, he would keep going, find her again, and bring her back. Because true love never dies, and memories are not meant to be kept but to be relived. Their love was not a story that could end in one chapter. It was a journey, a battle not only against the enemies out there but also with the unconscious, with time, and all that was lost. And finally, when they met again, this time not in the darkness or under simulated light, but in a place where they could see, feel, and love each other without anything holding them back. Only love, and everlasting light.